I'm Véronique.
And I'm Silvia.
Welcome to the High Vibes and the Mind podcast,
where multicultural moms connect.
Hi everyone. Today we have a guest and her name is Shell. We are going to talk about a topic that we hear a lot about, but maybe do not really know about, ADHD. Shell has more than 35 years of experience in education, working with neurodivergent and neurotypical clients. Shell also brings coaching, teaching, training, and nurturing gifts to ADHD adults that focuses on illuminating, creating, and transforming lack of clarity to a well-defined direction and sustainable work life. Shell recently launched the quintessential coursebook, Unlock Your Career Path, a course for neurodivergent adults and teens that breaks down and simplifies the career decision-making process for the ADHD neurodivergent community. Some have described her book the most ADHD-friendly book on the market. Let's hear it from Shell. Hi, so this is Véronique and Silvia back on High Vibes and a Mic. So we have a guest today. Her name is Shell. And my first question for you, Shell, is, so what does exactly neurodivergent mean? Is it the same as having a ADHD, or is it something different? Because I hear that term neurodivergent a lot. I've been hearing that term lately a lot on blogs, online. Yeah. I'm not really sure what it means. So can you explain to us?
So that's always a tough one for me. I always look at it from my own perspective. ADHD is neurodivergent. It's one form of neurodivergence. And other forms are autism, Asperger's, and then there's some other ones that I'm sure other people are better at sort of explaining. But it's basically the way our brains are wired. Right. And the way we think, the way we interact in the world, the things that impact us. For me personally, I get distracted. I only focus on things I really want to focus on. The work I do is the work I love, and I can't do any other work. And I think that's true ultimately for people with ADHD who are neurodivergent and who are neurodivergent. And for me personally, organizing is a thing I have trouble with. Staying on topic a lot of times. Sometimes, what's the word I want to think of? Blurting is another thing that we tend to do. For me, when I realized I was different than the people that I went to school with, the people I was like always in my head. So we have a lot of thoughts going on. So it feels like we're being bombarded with thoughts in our head all the time. We get distracted by that. I like to describe it for myself as being like, are you familiar with Grand Central Station in New York?
I've seen it on TV. I've never been there.
Yeah, we've probably seen images of it, and there's always people whizzing by and stuff like that. It's kind of like standing in the middle of it and all the people whizzing by. That's kind of how our thoughts are, is that we have a lot of conversations going on in our head, not schizophrenia, but basically we just have a lot of thoughts going on. So we're always conversing with ourselves. We always hear voices telling us different things, or just judging things that are going on. And it's hard to explain, but the thoughts are typically never ending.
But do you talk? Do you talk with yourself like out loud, or it's just like a silent voice? Silent voice in your...
So yeah, I talk out. Well, I have dogs, so I talk to them. But no, I do talk out loud sometimes, just so that I can clarify what's in my head with what I really want to say.
Yeah.
So even though, I live alone, so I can do that. I don't look crazy to myself. I get to hear myself having this conversation, right?
So when did you realize, when did you find out exactly that you had
ADHD? Was it when you were a teen? Did you have issue when you were a teen, and then finally when you were adult, you're like, well, okay, this is what I have?
Late
Or was it
adult,
younger?
late. Yes. And I think the reason it never actually occurred to me that, first of all, I didn't know that adults even had it until later in life. I always thought it was a kid thing, that children had it. But for me, I always loved the work I did, so I never had problems in the workplace or anything like that. But I always knew that I thought differently than other people, and I was always trying to what they call in our community of ADHDers masking, which is trying to act like everyone else, and think that certain ways of acting and being are normal when we're clearly not normal. So trying to be like everyone else is such a stress in and of itself. And I should say it was for me. And I never, you can kind of pretend and mask for a while and it works. It can work to a certain extent, but at some point it stops working. At some point it just doesn't work anymore. And things start to what I call leak, and you start to make mistakes. You start to say things you don't mean. You get frustrated. There's a lot of depression, I think, or people who have depressive moods, and there's a lot of crossover between, um, both clinical and situational depression. ADHD can cause people to think and act in a way that isn't consistent really with who they are, who they truly are. It's very hard to be yourself entirely with ADHD unless you get to the point where you just don't care, like I do. I really am at that point where I don't really care what other people think that much. I am who I am. And the people I work with, I do a master class called Your Next Career Move Masterclass. And I tell everybody, I'm not going to act any differently than the way I did when you first met me. I am who I am. And sometimes I may seem out of line or whatever, but that's just me. I might say things that are a little off. And I might overstay my welcome at certain times in terms of conversations. I just got into a terrible one the other day. Anyway, where you're always asking for forgiveness sometimes. It's a way of being that can really act in your favor. Actually, it can be a very positive thing, and that's what I try and do with my ADHD, is to look at how it's actually helped me. There's so many ways that it's helped me be extraordinary, in not only in my work but just in the way I live my life, right? And then there are ways that it can be detrimental and it can be difficult and challenging. And so I think a lot of times when you asked me when I was diagnosed, I was much later in life, and it came after after a time when I had started a company, because many people with ADHD are very entrepreneurial.
Okay.
We're kind of the movers and shakers in the world. The people that are really out there, even presidents. There have been quite a few presidents with ADHD. We really are big picture thinkers, so we think like in this 360-degree kind of way. So very often I say it's almost like we have a sixth sense about things, and we can sort of kind of see the future in an odd kind of way. But the problem breakdown comes when you're trying to communicate that to other people. So when I started a franchise system called Kids Art, which is it became an international children's franchise, still going, by the way, by one of our first franchisees who took it over. And I dedicated my life to it. I put my all into it. I came up with the idea. I brought the people together. We formed the concept. We started franchising in 2002, many, many years ago. And we became fairly successful. And I loved the process of putting it together and the creativity. So people with ADHD tend to be very creative in many kinds of
Okay.
ways, not just artistically, but in our thinking, our problem solving, our strategizing, all, coming up with really unique ideas. So I loved that part of putting the company together. And I really enjoyed it. We grew, we were successful, we were international. We were doing actually very well, although we were just kind of we weren't doing it in any kind of formal way. We weren't actually very good at really understanding the franchise system in general, but we were able to get to like 39 franchises or 60 some odd franchises in 39 states and 15 countries. So we were able to impact with our art program for children where we had teachers, people bought our system and then they went out and taught other people to go out into schools and teach children art our way, which was a unique, creative way of helping children become, allow themselves to be creative and think creatively. So this is kind of how things went in the franchise of what we were helping people to do. So that's where I stayed aligned. But before that, I was doing career counseling and coaching for many, many years. That was my focus, and I loved it. But I woke up with this idea of doing kids art one day, and I followed it for many years, and that took me off track. So
Wow.
I call it a mission that I was on too long. It was a mission that I was on too long because I
What do you
defined
mean? Excuse me. What do you mean he put you out of track? Because your first goal was to be a counselor, not to work too long on the
The first
franchise.
thing I did, yes, the first thing I did was I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor. I got my master's in vocational rehabilitation. I help people who were disabled find work that they could do within their physical
Okay.
limitations. So I work with all kinds of disabilities. And then I didn't like the system that I was working in, which is the workers' compensation system. I found it really not fun anymore for me. I became very bored with it and I didn't enjoy it anymore. And so what I realized I wanted to do was just work with regular people who wanted to make a career shift and find a way to find the right career for themselves and do what they loved. And they were motivated enough to come to me without me being assigned to somebody who was injured on the job, right? So it was it was a difference between them having to come to me to fulfill the workers' compensation to work within that system, and other people, regular people, coming to me because they really wanted to come to me, right? So I then was trained after I realized that I wanted a system for myself that I could use with people, and I got trained by Richard Bowles, who wrote "What Color Is Your Parachute?" Are you familiar with that?
Mm.
So, "What Color Is Your Parachute" is a book that uh, was is close to 50 years, maybe more old, and they have a new edition every single year. And I was trained by the man who wrote the book. He was considered at that time like the grandfather of career counseling. And he was my mentor. I considered him my mentor. And I used his system for many, many years, and it was very successful. It really helped people. Again, this was before I was diagnosed, right? So I'm kind of backtracking in my story here, and I will get to how I got my diagnosis, which I think is an important. The story is important because it kind of leads up to why it's important to really kind of look at how you're doing your work, the ways in which you do your work, and to really understand what's important to you, right? So I was working. I worked with the parachute system for many years. Loved it. Found it to be very helpful until I started. Woke up with this idea of doing kids art. Then I started doing kids art for many years. It took over my life. It literally took over my life. And it's a franchise system, it's a business, obviously. So you have to put your all into it. And it was way more than I ever thought it would be, which is, I'm sure a lot of people who start companies realize once they get into it. You know what I mean? You get
Yeah.
into it and then you go, oh, I had no idea it was going to be this, right? So I did that for several years. Again, it was fairly successful until I stopped enjoying the work, until it became the day to day putting out fires, and just I wasn't enjoying what I was personally doing anymore, which is like for people with ADHD or neurodiverse people, this is like a death knell. This is the thing that's going to take you out if you don't enjoy your work at some point. If you're not feeling fulfilled and it's not a sustainable fulfillment. And that's what happened to me was I started just, oh God, it became like an albatross. And I was a CEO founder, right? So I tried to give the CEO position to someone else, and it was completely the wrong thing to do because the person wasn't the right person. And then it became a clash of personalities. And at that time, again, I was undiagnosed, and it was just that I did not feel understood. I felt like I was in this never-ending awful situation day to day that I couldn't really get out of. So I ended up getting out of it, but it wasn't in a good way. It was, kind of it was a trauma for me. So after everything ended, I realized there's something with me going on. There's something going on with me. It's not all the situation of being in that position, which number one, I hated it. So it made sense for me why I wasn't going to enjoy it. I was not going to do well anymore with it, I should say. But after it was over, I went into this kind of deep depression. Again, it was a situational kind of thing. And I literally went crawling to the bookshelf and put my hands on a book on ADHD that a friend of mine had sent me a couple of years ago, but I put it away because I said, what? She was a therapist. She sent me this book, right? And I looked at it and I just laughed and I put it into the drawer and I shoved it away. It was like I said, what are you talking about? That's for kids. I'm not, So I realized she probably knew what she was talking about. I just wish she had talked to me about it, so I understood a little bit more. But it turned out her son was very ADHD, so she kind of knew the characteristics. And so I went crawling to the bookshelf, put my hands on it, and started reading. And that was when I had this catharsis that I wasn't crazy.
No.
There wasn't anything really wrong with me. I just had this brain wiring that didn't mesh, and in a way, and I didn't really understand.
But what were the signs, like for you to be like, I need to read this book?
I knew something was off, and I knew the book was there. That's all I knew. It was like divine intervention. You talk about spirituality. That's where spirituality comes into this for me, because how would I know to go to that book? How would I know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you talked about being in a job and you feel that you're dying because you're bored to death, that's something that's why I'm not going to say I change job every month, but there was a time in my life when I was jumping from a job to another because I was really thinking I'm dying in here. So
yeah,
I'm starting to ask questions to myself.
Yeah,
to question myself.
It's what happens.
One of the symptoms.
Yeah. So I felt like I was always at odds with everyone. I mean, I just couldn't line up with the other people who are all what we call neurotypical, which you may be, which means that you don't have, you're just you think kind of along, you can focus on things one at a time. You don't have this confusing thing going on in your head. You're not distracted. You can be distracted because let's face it, our electronics will distract us
Yes.
now, even without ADHD. So I'm not saying there's not the distractibility factor for people, but with people with ADHD, that had been going on for me since I was a kid. It wasn't something and I'm old, right, compared to you guys. So,
But isn't it something your teacher should have? Because now I think the teacher around the
no, not
parents hearing
not
your
in the olden
kids.
days,
Not
Oh,
in
not
right?
back in
okay.
the days. Come on. So
But
new.
now they're
Not
kind of doing it, right?
Yeah, now I think there's a little bit more of a way that teachers can identify some of the
Yeah.
characteristics, and
Mhm.
it's better known and it better accepted.
Yeah.
But I was inattentive ADHD, which meant that I wasn't overtly a hyper, physically hyper child.
Mhm.
So I would be in my head. I would be hyperactive in my head. It was like I was jumping around, only it was in my head.
Mm.
And I would doodle. I don't even know how I made it through school. If you talk to a lot of people with ADHD, many of them have doctor's degrees. Many of them are like unbelievably well educated with degree after degree after degree, and you wonder how they get it. We don't have any idea. It's like will. You just have the will to do it, and you do it. But somehow I graduated high school, and then I went to, I think, a community college for a couple of years. Then I went to regular college and got a degree in communications, I think. But a few years in between, I was lost in my 20s. And I always tell the story that um, I was fired from like 15 jobs
Oh wow.
doing what I hated. Well, it was because I hated the work and
Yeah.
I had ADHD, but I didn't know it, right? So I always tell people if you're unhappy in your work and you're doing badly, it's because you're in the wrong job. It's not because of who you are, what your skills are, what you're capable of. It's just because you're in the wrong job. That's all. It's a bad fit for you. It's not the right fit. So yeah, when I finally got my diagnosis, I started again working with career clients, and only I started targeting the people I started working with were people with ADHD only. I just focused on my tribe, and I've never been happier. That was 15 years ago.
So how do you help them to make a career choice? Those teens and those adults with ADHD, because it looks like it's very hard for them to
It is.
find, not to
It
find a
can
career,
be.
but yet it can be, yeah, to know where.
Yeah. Well, I think in general for people, because I worked with everyone, I work with neurotypical people, I work with everyone trying to help them find the right career. There is no step by step for doing that for most people. There's no class usually that people get to figure this stuff out before they do. Some people are lucky enough to have like been taught something like the parachute system that I taught. But what I found when I was working with people with ADHD is that I had to keep adding stuff and I had to keep fixing it and making it more relatable and doing more I call them metaphorical graphics. So I had to do graphics so people could understand better. I sent you a copy of the book. So I finally ended up writing the book because it was like I was so sick of using a workbook that there was so much gerrymandering going on in the book,
Yeah.
tweaking and all these things that made it really hard to help people navigate it and to see all the nuances of it because they would read a section of it and get completely confused. So I said, okay, I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to do it and do it my way. And it's going to be my system based and inspired by the system I've been using. So I always give Richard Bowles credit. It's right on the front of my book, inspired by. But he used to use the metaphor of a flower, and the different petals of a flower would make up the different elements that make up your ideal work. And I changed it to planets and galaxy. So people with my brain wiring go, oh, I can relate. They really get the planet kind of thing. This is kind of what it looks like. I don't know if there's any visual on what we're doing, but this is
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. The
yeah,
planets, yeah.
so that's
I was gonna ask you, what is this? Because I
what
wasn't
is
pretty
it?
sure. No, yeah, when I saw it, I was like, oh, the planets. What is that?
Exactly. That's not, I mean, so we're attracted, people with ADHD, neurotypical or neurodivergent people are very attracted by graphics. And it's very hard to read like solid text over and over and over again. We need things broken down. We didn't need instructions simplified. We need to have little graphics and fun things in between. And lots of examples and metaphorical graphics. Like I said, if you read through it, you'll see a few of those in the book. And finding ways to prioritize your must-haves. So that's what we're doing.
I just wanted to, I was going to ask how do you help them identify their careers? Like, the
Right. So I take them through this step-by-step process. And now I do like a small cohort of people, 4 to 6 people in a class kind of, it's a class, but it's interactive, it's instructional, and it's coaching, right? And we use the book. So they go through the book, but the difference is they get coaching as they're going through it. So here's the thing. It's a very nuanced process, and we're talking about eventually moving into a nonlinear kind of path, meaning that it's not going to be straightforward. You're probably not going to go become an accountant. You know what I mean? You're probably going to be doing something that has a foundation, what I call a foundation. For me, my foundation is education. So everything I do educates in some way, inspires, instructs. That's my foundation for my career path. And coaching is part of that. So usually, what they're doing is they're defining for themselves all the must-haves, the things that are important to them, what their values are. It becomes all about them, not about what somebody else wants. To get it, it's not about how do you get a job. It's about how do you create the work that you will thrive in.
So is that part of the 7 step that you talk about how to define your ideal work? Is that what they're going to do? They're going to work on?
Yes. And I'm happy to say what those are.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we talk about the first thing are identifying the transferables, the skills that you want to be using. And we have really fun ways to get at that. I mean, it's got to be fun. Okay, there's got to be an element of fun in it for us. If we get bored, it's all over, right? So I think the book is written in the way our brains think. I tried to make it so that it's very relatable from an ADHD or a neurodivergent, diverse perspective. So defining the skills you want to be using, and also the traits, the things about who you are that you need to bring to the workplace. Have you ever been in a job, for example, where you couldn't really be yourself? You really felt like you couldn't just totally be who you are. You had to kind of act a certain way to.
I'm thinking, Silvia,
No? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've been in situations like that where I couldn't be myself.
I'm thinking. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I did. I think I was felt like, no, I'm fine.
You're lucky. So many people, when I ask them that question, everybody raises their hand. Yes. It's like, yeah, they've all been in situations where they've had to do the masking on and pretend to be somebody that they really weren't. So when I say skills and traits, those traits are your personality traits that are important to you. They're who you are. Like, I am a such and such person, I am a such and such person, and those are the traits that those have to be able to express in your work in some way.
Like expressing yourself. Just one question, because I I wanted to know if communication or miscommunication is a big thing with
Yes.
people diagnosed, and how they can be helped with that. Because I think I have a friend.
Yes.
I hope she's not gonna hear that. But like she always
Everybody has an
like,
ADHD friend.
I know. And I always
Yeah.
like she always has this communication problem, and she's like very like airy, like that type too, you know. And she
Yeah.
tells me that I have problems, that she has problems communicating with people, that they never understand what she meant to say, and that happens at work,
Yeah.
at home.
Yes.
So yeah, how you can help them? There is a way to help with that more direct
Yeah.
conversation.
So that wouldn't be me personally.
Mhm.
It would start with being in the right job fit where you can
Mhm.
express yourself, number one, and where that isn't a sin to be, you know, to feel like you can't express yourself. But if you're in the right work, you are expressing yourself. You are who you are because it's aligned. It's all working together. The work I'm in, I can express myself. I can say silly things. You know, people get it. If I were in a job in a different kind of setting, doing the work that I really didn't like doing, and I was miserable. It was a very conservative kind of setting, very somewhat authoritarian, somewhat. Do you know what I'm saying? If I was in
Mhm.
that kind of a setting, I would be miserable because I would feel like I'd have to keep it zipped half the time. So you have to be able to feel comfortable in expressing yourself in your work, but you never know what that is until you go through this process of identifying what those things are that are important, right? So that's what we do. We go through this process of figuring it out. Let's figure it out. What is it? And name it. And now you own it. Okay? You name it and you own it, and then you prioritize it. And that's what this colorful planets thing is about. You put it down on there. The next thing are the kinds of people that you want to work with. And that would be, what are their characteristics? You know, people who are open, people who are flexible, people who are leaders, people who are have a sense of humor, all those things, those characteristics, you need to identify what they are because that's important to you, right? And so it's giving you permission to say what you've never been able to say before and put it all down and really own it and say it in a strong way. I only want to work with these kind of people. These are the people I must be around if I'm going to be around them 8 hours a day, right? And then the next thing are the working conditions. Like, what are those conditions that I have to have? For me, I have to be able to work from home, right? I have to be able to use Zoom to do for me, working on my own has always been my thing. And also not having a boss. I don't really want to have a boss. I think you'll find that a lot of people with ADHD or neurodivergent people will tell you no boss. If I could have no boss, I'd be really happy.
Oh, I might have
They don't
that
like,
then.
they don't, right.
We all do.
That's what I'm saying, podcasters. Because they
Cannot
don't
have a
want
boss.
people telling them what to do. You don't want somebody telling you what to do, right? When you kind of know, when you know what you love doing and you really love doing the tasks involved in that work, then it's just an easy organic thing. You
Yeah.
don't need somebody telling you what to do because you want to do it. You want to do the best you can do, right? You really want, it's just an internal kind of desire versus somebody telling you you've got to do this within a certain, with these strict guidelines and be micromanaged the whole way. So being micromanaged is a big no-no for many people with ADHD. Don't tell me what to do. Let me get this done. I can get it done. Give me a few kind of loose parameters. Give me a little bit of a structure, but with a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
So people with ADHD need a lot of wiggle room. They'll get it done, but if you hammer them all the time, you look over their shoulder, you try and and usually what goes along with it is you're not doing doing it right or something.
Yeah.
So
People, you don't like to be micromanaged. I mean, personally, I hate that. I hate being in my last
yeah,
job. I was micromanaged and I had to go. I couldn't stay there. It wasn't
yeah,
possible.
no, it's just really impossible. So there's so many different working conditions that it's important to identify and to really expand on in detail with examples. You know, I want to be in this kind of an office. I want to have these kind of colors in my office. I mean, I get people down to the paper clips, right? I really have them go into what I call a self-accommodation plan,
Yeah,
which means that,
I was gonna ask you
yeah,
that part of the five step to self-accommodation in the
yeah.
workplace. Okay. So the
So
colors and
self-accommodation, you can't do it unless you know what it is, unless you know what you want. This whole process is you can't have it till you know what you want. Is that not law of attraction? You got to know what you want.
yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
This is the process to get you to law of attraction. You've got to it tells you exactly what you want and what you need because you're prioritizing. Did you see the prioritizing matrix on there? That little cute little exercise that they do. It's a tool that is used to figure this stuff out, like what's the most important thing to me.
Okay. No. I was gonna ask you, from your experience, because you've been working with all those people for a long time. Usually, do they end up almost in the same career like field? Do they have like preferred field when you have ADHD? Do you help them? Do you guide them, to the like more creative job? I guess. I mean, you're not going to work for a lawyer or something like that, in an office or
Ultimately, they guide themselves,
8 hours. They give
and
themselves.
and the steps are pretty much what the very first thing is for some people. And when you said fields, yeah, they choose. Sometimes they're in the wrong field. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's about really identifying what the right field is and what the right subject is that they want to focus on, or I call it special knowledge, something that you're really, really interested and drawn to, but you may know nothing about it until maybe you take the skills that you have and plug them into a whole new field, right? So you can get a job doing the same thing you've always done, but just do it in a whole new field, being surrounded by the people that you're interested in working with. So there are ways to gradually move into doing work that you love, and to doing some exploration. So the process I use is not just there's homework and you've got to be talking to people. So you do have to be out there communicating with people who are doing things that you're attracted to and curious about. So curiosity plays a big role in what we're doing. And so identifying, yes, the right field or area that you're attracted to the most, something that you're always going to want to do something in. It may not be a specific kind of job, but you're always going to want to do something related to that area. And that's where the nuance comes in, because you might need training of some kind, but you'll start to understand what kind of training you need very specifically, so you're not wasting your money on what we call shiny object classes. Ever took one of those?
Yes,
Shiny
I did.
object classes?
Last year.
You know what I'm talking.
I did.
Yeah, you take them. Is it sitting on the shelf? Did you finish it?
No, actually, I didn't.
I won't ask you
I
how much
didn't
you
finish it.
spent. I won't ask you how much you spent on
Not too much.
people.
Thank God, not
They
too
end
much,
up
but I
spending
didn't finish.
thousands of dollars on these things,
Yeah, yeah.
thousands of dollars. So this is going through this process. You'll actually never do that again, because you'll know exactly what you need to spend money on to be able to be marketable somehow, or be able to work in the field you're interested in.
So at
Right. So,
what stage people come to you? Is it because you said you're working also with teens? So how do you approach the teen now? Because as an adult, I guess people realize after a while, okay, this is not working out. I need some help, and they found you.
yeah.
But how do you find the young adult? How do they come to
So I
you?
work with young adults mainly. I would say the youngest would be more like 19 or 20, so after
Mm-hmm.
high school. But the book is geared for actually high schoolers as well. So the book is something you can use in the high school, and I've written it so that it can actually be curriculum for a teacher. They can use it without actually having to write
Okay.
curriculum. It's all right there for them. But with younger people, it's no different than with older people. The younger people have the advantage of not having been through the dirt that a lot of older people have. You know, they've been soul crushed in their jobs. They felt like uh, many times they're left with feeling like their confidence is so low they feel worthless. They feel like they can't do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really sad, you know, so you don't have the baggage when you're younger. It's much easier to go through this process because you don't have these other situations that you've been in or experienced kind of dragging you down. So younger people tend to go through it much easier. But it's also, don't we all wish that we had that when we were younger kind of thing?
Yeah.
It's something that at any stage of life you can go through and start to make a shift of some kind, and start to see where things could potentially go in a realistic way and in a fun way, because now you're finally saying, here's what I want. I don't care what they want anymore. Here's what I want. And when you want it and you know what it is, aren't you more prepared to go in and talk about it to somebody,
Yeah. I
like in
think
an
there's
interview?
there's nothing
Yeah.
worse than being lost, like between sometimes two jobs. Sometimes I was feeling very lost. I'm like, what am I going to do now? What am I supposed to do with my life? When you feel lost
Yeah.
and
Yes.
you know you have to do something to make a living, or you have to find a job.
Yeah.
But when you find something you really love, it's not even working. It's not. You don't feel like you're working. Actually, you feel like you're just living your life, and
You
you're being paid for.
don't.
Yeah,
Do you think
that's
I
the
feel
best.
I'm working now? I'm not working. This is not working to
Yeah,
me.
this is a conversation. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
chat.
This is a conversation, and yet I see this as it's the only form of what I call, if you want to call it marketing, where I can talk about what I do in an interview format that I really enjoy, and I can't really do very much else, to be honest with you. I can sometimes write articles, but and I have somebody else posting on Instagram for me because I hate doing that social media stuff. I just do what I want to do, and I find people to help me do it. You know,
And
that's
it
all.
works out, right? And it works out that
It
way.
works out. It works out. But it might take a while sometimes to find the right people, but it's so worth it because, boy, it's a relief when you find the right people. It's like now I can just do what I really love doing.
Focus on what you
I can
like.
just spend my time focused on that and
Yeah.
just get better at that, right?
Yeah.
Get better and better and better.
It's good to shed a light on that
Mm.
and help all the people who are, even if they're not diagnosed, they're unsure, they might listen to this podcast and be like, okay, well, maybe something I should check
Yeah.
out and figure it out, because
Mhm.
you're just helping so many people that way, finding their path, their life path, career path. It's important.
I hope so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've helped hundreds of people over the years. I'm very proud of the work I've done over the years. I just wish I had been diagnosed earlier so I could have started working like with a neurodivergent uh, folks who are like me, who think like I do, and because I truly understand what it's like out there. I've been through everything, so there's no experience that they've had that I haven't had 100 times over, right? And
Mhm.
now I can talk about what it's like to have the freedom of doing what you actually enjoy doing, and and plus the reality. There's also reality that's in there. You got to get in there. It's not pie in the sky stuff. It's really, this is what I need for me to do my very best work, which includes being productive, uh, having ideas, being a contributor, and having a sustainable kind of career path or work path of some kind that's going to make me a living that I can grow on, you know. Uh, I mean, writing a book was never in my wheelhouse. I never thought I would ever do anything like that. I avoided it. Like I like writing to some extent, but not enough to write a book. But then I realized I had already written the book by the time I wrote the book. And then I still had to write a lot. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be, but it was definitely worth it because once you get going, it's like you can't go back, right? You've got to keep going. And I'm so glad I did it because the people that have benefited from it have given me such incredible feedback about how it's helped them to really figure stuff out. So the book I wrote for people who can't afford to take the master class or really are in a position to take the master class. It will help get you started. And I always tell people you've got to do it with somebody else. You've got to do it with other people, like a therapist, or, have somebody sit down with you to be accountable. You've got to have that accountability. And I have like a whole section where I talk about that at the back.
Okay.
And then in the class, we use it as our workbook, and we go through a lot of the nuances, the things that come up in people's lives that remind them of why they were in that place to begin with. And we kind of go through a lot of those challenges. And one of the things that is really, really important in this process is what Bowles called it the safekeeping self. So I really expanded on that idea and wrote a whole chapter on it. And in the work that I do with people, I bring it up every single week with them, because what that is are all those thoughts, you've heard of the committee in your head. You've heard that term, right?
I
I've
heard
got
that
the
term,
committee.
yeah.
Yeah. So all the outside influences, essentially, other people's expectations and ideas, and why don't you do this and why don't you do that? That's what most people are plagued with. And those are the things that can literally keep you stuck from even exploring something you think might be kind of cool, right? So people come in with too many ideas. That's the typical thing of somebody with ADHD. I've got so many ideas, and they do nothing.
Oh,
They don't do anything, but they have all these ideas. Even starting with one doesn't work, right? So that's when the safekeeping self kind of enters the picture, and that's that side of you that stops you from taking action. It says, I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, yada yada. Do
is
you know
it doubt, fears? How would you describe
doubts and
this?
fears? Yeah, it is, but I try and name it.
Procrastination.
Yes.
Okay.
Procrastination is what happens as a result of it.
Yeah.
Like people procrastinate. And they get into perfectionism. Like perfectionism is essentially procrastination on steroids. It's like, it's got to be perfect or I won't do it at all.
Yeah.
And instead of just like checking things out here, being curious about something there, talking to somebody who might know a little bit more than you do about that thing. You know what I mean? Doing a little bit of research, talking to somebody in an organization that's of interest to you, like expanding on letting your curiosities really go crazy in a fun way, and getting the answers before you shut it down so that you can then make a decision, right? But the safekeeping self, all through it, as they're going through the process, starts popping up like a little gremlin on your shoulder saying, "Oh," right? Do you
So
know what
how
I
do you?
mean?
Yeah. So how do you work through that then? How do you stop it? Do you have
Number one
a
is, yeah, number one is to
method?
recognize
Okay.
yeah, and I have a whole section, like I have a notebook that actually you get with the book that has all the different. Can I show it to you real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
There's a section in it on the called Safekeeping Self, where you just write about it. You write about when it starts coming up for you and you start getting clarity. The more you do that, you start getting clearer and clearer about when it's happening. And the first time to celebrate is the first time you recognize it for what it is. And that's celebration time, right?
Mhm.
So this is the section. It's called My Career Galaxy Safekeeping Self.
Okay.
So
So you
you
just
write
write down your
you just write
IDs and
down, there it is
yeah.
again. I was going through this process. I was thinking about contacting someone and I stopped myself because I felt like a fool. I felt like if I talk to them, they're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to wonder who I am, or I'm less than, I'm not, good enough to talk to people. Really, these are the kinds of things that people think. And it's just sad because most people are really willing and helpful in terms of answering questions if they're doing something they enjoy, or doing the work that they're doing is something they can help somebody else decide if it's right for them, by giving them information. So, and exploring, just doing a little online research, Google something, right?
Mhm. All right, shall we I think we're out of time. I'm gonna have to go. So, Sylvia, do you have another question you want to ask?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Shell, if people want to find all your material and information, where can they reach you? You said you have Instagram
I am
and
on Instagram, Shell_Mendelson. And yeah, I don't use but it's basically about my work for the most part. My website is, you can use Passion, PASSION 2TO career.com. And then to find out more about my book, it is unlockyourcareerpath.com.
okay. We also, of course, will put all this information in the show notes and all the link, so people can just click on them and find out anything about you. Thank you very much for answering all our questions today. It was really interesting. I think we can have talked even for 1 more hour because
Yes.
there's a lot to unpack. But for now, we have to go.
Yeah, one more thing I just want to say, your
Sure.
next Career Move Masterclass, please, if you are interested, just sign up for an intro call with me. I would love to talk to you. So,
All right. Well,
okay.
thank you very
Do it,
thank you very
guys.
much.
Yeah.
Ladies, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast when you listen to us. Click on subscribe. We also have a YouTube channel, Instagram account, and a Facebook page. Don't forget to follow us if you want all the new clip that we post during the week. Thank you, and we talk to you later.
Thank you, Sophia and Veronique. It was wonderful meeting you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to High Vibes and a Mic. Until next time, laugh hard, stay silly, and never forget to bring your sense of humor. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.